have been talking for a long time about how the narrative against Switch 2 is going to collapse. At what point are people going to acknowledge that the Switch 2 is successful and that it's a good video game console and that it has a lot of great exclusive games? And it seems as if we are on the verge of a breakthrough. Nintendo Land released a video crying, whining, bitching about not getting a 3D Mario. So, according to this goon, Mario is a struggling, irrelevant IP that Nintendo is neglecting, and that there is nothing else to play on Nintendo Switch 2. Like, there's nothing else he's interested in. He doesn't care about Donkey Kong Bonanza. Like, where is my 3D Mario? So instead of doing what everyone is telling him to do, which is just play other games, instead he constantly just goes on social media and just aggressively just you know gets upset over not getting a new 3D Mario. And this is absurd for a lot of reasons. Of course, DK Bonanza just came out, Mario Kart World just came out. There are plenty of other games that came out, but I do think like the primary reason this take is so controversial is how limited does your range as a gamer have to be where you absolutely need to have a new 3D Mario every couple of years, right? You don't like expand into other genres. You don't play other games from other franchises, other developers. Like all you care about is 3D Mario. And not necessarily because it's like the best 3D platformer out there or some major milestone. Like to me, I think these kind of people are only getting fired up about Mario because of the brand name. I think people like this only exist because Mario is the premier name in gaming. So it doesn't matter that Mario Kart World has just come out and that Donkey Kong Bonanza was made by the Odyssey team. It doesn't matter about all that. There are all these other options because we're not getting Nintendo Mario 3D Mario on Nintendo Switch 2. That means that there are no big upcoming games for Switch 2. And that's what he tried to say is that he made a video saying that Nintendo Switch 2 has no major upcoming games, which is, of course, ridiculous. Mario Kart World was, a huge deal and a huge success story, and we're still in this process of everybody just kind of religiously denying it. It's just kind of their cope now is just obsessively downplaying what Nintendo is doing with Switch 2. So, what does that mean exactly? What exactly are we seeing with Nintendo and just the fans? Like we're in this weird phase right now where a bunch of older YouTubers, dudes who are like, career, who do this for a career, are just upset that none of the major games that Nintendo produces are really something that they can milk or make content out of. This is the thing with Nintendo, and like the real reason why you don't see a lot of people in this sphere is because that it is very difficult to make content about Nintendo without having to resort to clickbait or making things up or like, inventing Nintendo Direct leaks. This is typically what happens is that the most like prevalent like cash making time to cover Nintendo is just before a Nintendo game releases. So right now, people are talking about Legend ZA. People are downplaying Legend ZA. They're trying to say it looks bad and that Digimon will do better, which is of course a giant cope. But this is how these people get attention. This is how they attract people to their channels. Is just relentlessly attacking Nintendo, and those people have an audience, but eventually there comes a tipping point where, fans begin to notice the stereotypes and begin kind of addressing like very real concerns that they have with the criticisms of these games. Like, for example, I talk extensively about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and how the narrative has always been that the game is bad, that it's broken, that it's glitchy, that it has too many bugs type Pokemon, right? Like all these weird nonsensical complaints that Pokemon Scarlet, like that don't really have any real basis in reality at all, right? Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was a huge success story for Nintendo, and yet, after all this time, you still have a significant chunk of the gaming population trying to make it seem like Pokemon is this major disaster of a brand to the point where Legends EA, which is one of the bigger releases this year, is straight up getting downplayed and ignored, even though it's a major deal on Nintendo platforms. So, what does this mean exactly? What can we expect to see going forward? Well, like I think eventually we are going to see the claims that Nintendo Switch 2 has no major games and it's not doing very well. We're going to see that completely collapse. And I do think it's going to be because of hyperbolic videos like this, It's going to be because of people spurging out over Fire Emblem getting announced. It's going to be because of things like that. It isn't going to be because of, you know, like anything else. Like the reality is, uh, these people just incessantly complaining about Nintendo, it's going to lead to this situation where eventually, people who genuinely like and enjoy the brand and what they're doing, like they are eventually going to start rejecting it. And new stereotypes are going to form. Like 10 years ago, it was really common to downplay anime style games and sword fighters and Smash. And although we're still like experiencing that to a certain extent, like it's also getting laughed at. We're in the early stages of people rejecting Fire Emblem hate, the RPG hate, and I expect it's going to simply grow and expand past this point, where eventually Fire Emblem will, be regarded as one of Nintendo's best IPs. And honestly, we're kind of already there. The fans already think that. But to this day, we still have this weird refusal from the community to like accept these games as relevant, to accept them as real Nintendo games because like, oh, they look too anime. Like, oh, imagine that, a Japanese brand being too anime. It is downright laughable how many people have just stuck to their guns in this regard, to downplay these games, but it isn't going to survive, I think, another 10 years. Now, I love 3D Mario. I love everything Nintendo does with the brand. I love the Mario team and everything they contribute to gaming. But at the same time, we really do have to start acknowledging that all of this concern trolling about anything that isn't a big budget Nintendo game, like it really needs to be called out for what it is, because we've seen this happen time and time again with Metroid Dread, with Bayonetta 3, with No More Heroes 3, with Shin Megami Tensei 5, with upcoming titles like Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. Splatoon 3 got hit pretty hard by it. Like Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Like there's just endless examples of this stuff, but you have certain demographics in the Nintendo community who really want to pretend that a lot of these perfectly viable Nintendo games aren't relevant because they simply aren't major sellers or the biggest brands they produce. In fact, this guy is making videos complaining about 3D Mario when we just got a DLC announcement for Super Mario Bros. Wonder, one of my favorite Mario games of all time, and a huge announcement for Switch 2. Like, if you're a Mario fan, the idea of 2D Mario should be interesting. The idea of Mario Sports should be interesting. The possibility of new Mario RPGs or spin-off titles should be interesting. Titles like Yoshi should appeal to you. Titles like Donkey Kong Bonanza should be a thing for you. Like, other products that Nintendo produce should be something that you're interested in. But more and more, we're seeing that's not the case. We're seeing more and more that people are writing off certain games, certain franchises, certain IPs for very petty, ridiculous reasons. In fact, it's gotten so bad that, like, in the past couple of years, I've noticed that people started discriminating against certain development studios, which is why Nintendo no longer reveals who makes the games. Because so many people were saying that, like, oh, I'd play Princess Peach Showtime if Retro made it, but if it's Good Feel, oh, I'm not interested. Like, you kept hearing stuff like that, and it got so out of hand and so ridiculous, like, that you can't really take it seriously. And I think at this stage, there's a lot of backlash towards the complaints about a lack of 3D Mario, but I think it really needs to expand to a lot of other sub communities in the gaming community. Like, because we see this kind of like these kind of complaints all the time about franchises getting too much support, franchises getting too little support, developers not being supported enough, like franchises like Metroid. Oh, Metroid could be a huge AAA product if they just gave it a chance. Like, never mind that the fact that those games still get made and just don't do very well, you see, like, this kind of mindset take all sorts of forms in the community, and, like, it's just so laughably stupid. Like, it really is, like, the core reason why I have such, like, a hatred for the Nintendo community and everything they stand for and everything they do, because they are unbelievably cringe. They will hype up whatever slop is put out in front of them, as long as it's like a realistic, like, mature game, third person shooter. But they'll reject, like, the far superior, like, Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. Like, we see this all the time in this community. And I have to wonder just how much longer this kind of thing can continue. Like, I definitely think, Kirby is a really interesting scenario, because, like, right now we're seeing, like, Kirby Air Riders and Metroid Prime 4 launching side by side. And the narrative among, like, the Nintendo community is that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be the bigger game, that it's a way bigger deal, and that's the one everyone's fired up about. But in reality, Kirby is, and always has been, way bigger than Metroid. Kirby Air Riders is 100% going to outperform Metroid Prime 4. It's going to outperform Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. It's going to be a way bigger deal than I think a lot of people realize. But what are you seeing from the community? Just writing it off, ignoring it, saying it's not going to be a big deal, that no one cares. And this is just something that I do think we really need to address, in that a lot of very popular Nintendo games keep getting written off for these kinds of because of these kind of misconceptions. Kirby is 100% bigger than Metroid. You know, Air Riders has had a lot of marketing behind it. They've put a lot of effort into it. Like, why exactly would it not do well? Because it's an Air Ride sequel, because it's Kirby. Like, Kirby, like, a very successful Nintendo brand. Like, the idea that this is going to fail, or that this isn't going to do well, it is so out of touch with reality that it really truly needs to be called out for what it is. And that's just one example. You know, when Fire Emblem Fortunes Weave was unveiled, we saw a lot of people crying about that, and now at this stage, we're seeing certain individuals in the community say the Switch 2 has no major game releases at all. And that's so delusional. That's so insane. And yet, for a certain demographic in the community, that's taken like gospel. Like, I've heard people say recently that Nintendo is more evil than Tencent. Which, if you know anything about, like, Tencent, is completely ridiculous. But the simple fact of the matter is, that's what people in the community are trying to tell you. That's the cope. That's, like, the agenda. Like, that's how desperate they are to gaslight you into thinking Nintendo is some declining company. The idea that Tencent, of all things, is going to swoop in and be a superhero and save us from Nintendo. It's just laughably stupid. And we are going to see more situations like this. But at a certain point, like the dam is going to burst, and we are going to see people acknowledge that they like love the Switch 2 and they love its games. But like I'm very curious at what point that like people like this are just told that they have to fuck off, because I have been tired of hearing these kinds of narratives for over a decade now. And I think the rest of the community is finally catching up to where I've been all this time.